our viewers at home, this will be a little bit different, as I know I had talked about earlier, where we will just have a live discussion, no PowerPoint presentations, just a discussion between the Port of Los Angeles, Eric, myself, and Hervé over in France. So why don't we kick it off? Thank you both for joining me today. It's a pleasure to see you. Chris, it would be great to kick off why is a green and smart port so important to you, the Port of Los Angeles, and to all of the other ports around the world, essentially?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of the discussion today. The reason a green port is important to us here at the Port of Los Angeles is because it's the only way for us to really grow. The port is an integral part of the community that we are situated in. And so we have to be able to be green because we have to make sure that the impacts on the surrounding community are not adverse, are not hurting people, especially what we refer to as environmental justice communities. Those are people who are poor and who are not able to have the kind of comforts that some people have, and they live in the shadow of an industrial facility. And so it's important that we have a port that is green, that manages the impacts on the environment, and that we make sure that we are helping to reduce environmental impacts around the world, particularly with the terrible crisis that faces us with climate change.
Thank you very much. We just heard from your colleague Jean over at the port and from the governor's office about the great work that you guys have been doing. So well done. Hervé, would love to bring it over to you for you to offer an explanation about what a green smart port means to you, the port, and to what you surmise as to other ports around the world. Okay, I think we're experiencing some technical difficulty over in France. So, Chris, over to you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the key initiatives in becoming a green smart port. Could you take us out from here? Thank you.
Sure. So the things that we've done. First of all, we began back in 2006 with an effort called a Clean Air Action Plan. And its purpose was to identify the impacts or identify the major sources of pollution at a port.
Guys, do we have any?
Trains, the trucks, the cargo handling equipment, and the harbor craft, which are essentially the tugboats and workboats. And we began to identify those as the major sources of pollution at the port. And we worked with industry and also with our local regulators and our community to identify programs to reduce emissions from those major sources. And so for each of those source categories, we've identified ways to reduce emissions. From the ships, two of the most important things that we've done is or three really, we slowed the ships down. It's referred to as slow steaming. So once they reach 40 nautical miles outside of the port, they slow down to about half of their normal speed. And that reduced speed has a dramatic benefit to the environment. It's like with your personal vehicle. If you drive down the highway, if you drive slower, your carbon footprint is much better. And so with a ship, it's the same, it's just a lot bigger. And so the impact is a lot more dramatic. The second thing is we incentivize the use of low sulfur fuels. And the third thing is we pioneered something back in the early 2000s called shore power. We actually have the ships, once they reach berth, they actually plug into electricity and they're able to turn off their auxiliary engines. And this has a very big benefit to the environment. Up to 1 ton of NOx emissions are reduced each visit when a ship plugs into shore power as opposed to using its auxiliary engines. And so it's pretty amazing, and the benefits have been tremendous. In other categories, the trucks, we incentivized replacement of our truck fleet to newer, cleaner trucks. We work closely with the terminals for cargo handling equipment to replace the cargo handling equipment. We're now beginning to test even cleaner zero emissions technologies. With the trains and the harbor craft, we've also done a lot. So these are the major programs that we did. Looking forward, we've identified, climate change, as I mentioned earlier, as probably the biggest crisis facing the world right now outside of COVID. And we think that the only way for us to be a good citizen and contribute to reducing the impacts of climate change is to transition to zero emissions. So we've set goals for our terminals to be zero emissions by 2030, and our drayage trucks, our on-road drayage trucks, to be zero emissions by 2035. So to accomplish this, we're going to have to do an awful lot of testing. Zero emission technologies are still in their early stages of development, but we believe that it's critical that we do this and that we work with our partners in industry and the agencies and so forth to try and make sure that we make that transition to zero emissions, because that's the best way for us to reduce our carbon footprint and contribute to reducing climate change.
Great, wonderful. Chris, it would also be very interesting if you could talk a little bit more about how you've chosen these partners or how you've worked with these partners in order to, I guess, reach your goals in the future.
Well, first of all, we are a very large port. We're the largest container port in North America, and so we have an awful lot of industry partners that we work with. And so really just reaching out to the businesses and the industrial operations that exist here in the port was our first step. And then we began to communicate with manufacturers of equipment and talking to them about how we'd like to work with them to further reduce emissions. They were very enthusiastic. Everyone is really supportive of the idea of clean fuels and clean equipment. And so we used our ability to essentially convene these partners into meetings, and we began to have these discussions. They embraced the idea. I think just about everybody these days is really happy about contributing to a green goods movement chain. And so once we told them what we thought the concerns were or what the issues were, they embraced it. And we're very proud that they were happy to work with us and embrace this goal.
Thank you very much. Hello, Hervé. How are you doing?
Hi, fine. How are you?
Very well. I think we've sorted the technical difficulties. So
I think so.
Great. So I'd like to pose one of the first questions that I had asked earlier is what is a green smart port to you, the Port of Marseille, and how you see the other ports around the world?
Well, I think it's very, very important. It's top priority for the Port of Marseille Authority and the Port of Marseille community to be both green and smart, and this for two reasons. On the one hand, because we do believe it's one of the best ways to create more value for our customers, and that's to be more competitive as a seaport. And I think that all seaports in the world do that. Should it be by optimizing flows, improving traceability of goods, increasing modal share of trains and barges? Should it be by optimizing energy production and consumption on the port area, proposing smart grids on our industrial zones? It's always a way both to optimize economic solutions and to reduce carbon footprint on port and transport activity. And on the other hand, it's also top of the list of public priorities. In Europe, should it be at the European level with the Green Deal, or at the national or more local level, it's really a priority. And last but not least, the society itself and the people living around the ports expect us to be greener and greener. So it is for all these reasons a priority for our port in Marseille, and I think for many ports in the world. So what does it mean if you want key initiatives? For example, we have many initiatives in progress. Let me focus maybe on 2 or 3 of them, namely cold ironing for the past and the present, LNG bunkering for the present and the near future, and for the more long term, maybe hydrogen. How can we be hydrogen hubs as port authorities? As far as cold ironing is concerned, we in Marseille, of course, have been one of the first ports in Europe to have started to ship power supply for regular shipping lines, starting 3 or 4 years ago in 2017 with the passenger ferries to Corsica. So we have developed a real experience in this system, and we are now investing more than 40 million euros to develop cold ironing solutions to international passenger ferries, ship repair activity, and to cruise ship in the next 4 years. And in addition, part of this power will be produced within the port, because we are investing in photovoltaic panels on top of warehouses in Marseille. The second example, second initiative I could mention is that we are now working hard to be a LNG hub. Since 2019, we have LNG-powered cruise ships calling Marseille on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have 2 LNG terminals on our port, in which we can reload micro LNG carriers for bunkering. So we have been working on regulations, processing, trainings required to organize a ship-to-ship LNG bunkering operation with high standards of safety and short duration, so that it can be done during the operation. We've been working together with Rotterdam and Singapore on this project, and in collaboration with Costa, the American Costa, and Shell, we succeeded perfectly during May and June this year in 2 ship-to-ship bunkering operations. So it was the first operational bunkering in Marseille, and this is for cruise ships. And in the container business, as you may know, CMA CGM shows Marseille as one of the 3 ports in the world for LNG bunkering. So starting next year, Total will supply 5 15,000 TEUs LNG-powered container ships, CMA CGM in Marseille. So we are quite proud to be one of the ports in the world able to propose LNG bunkering for all of our customers, not only cruise and container, of course. And maybe a third example for the future is hydrogen. I think LNG appears as a transition solution, and hydrogen is probably the next step. Ports will have an essential role, I believe, to play in the use of new fuels such as hydrogen, which will need production capacities that port spaces can accommodate. And at the same time, the increasing consumption by industry, should it be refineries or steel plants, for example, and mobility, will enable economies of scale. So we have several H2 projects already in progress in Marseille. I can give you more details if you want.
Great, thank you very much. Chris, you and I spoke last week, and we were talking a little bit about the alternative fuels and what's going on in the Port of Los Angeles. Would you please share with our audience today with regards to that?
Well, there are a number of things, and I think some of them were just discussed. I mean, we are working with natural gas, and renewable natural gas is the particular type of fuel that is really being pushed around the Port of Los Angeles. Renewable natural gas is the natural gas that comes from farms and landfills and so forth, and the carbon footprint associated with the collection of that natural gas is much lower than the stuff that comes out of the ground. And so renewable natural gas equipment, at least for the next few years, has a lot of promise to not only reduce emissions, but the carbon footprint is less even than diesel equipment. And then moving toward hydrogen, as was just mentioned, we are testing both battery electric equipment as well as hydrogen fuel cell equipment. We're pretty excited. We're testing top handlers. For those of your viewers who don't know, they're essentially one of the most important pieces of equipment at a container terminal. They're like a forklift that lifts up from the bottom, except the top handler grabs from the top. And the reason it does that is it makes it easier to grab a container. They can lift containers up to 80,000 pounds. We're testing the world's first battery electric top handler. We're also testing a hydrogen fuel cell top handler. We believe that the ability to get one of those top handlers to operate using a battery or hydrogen, some kind of alternative fuel, is extremely important and will be a big breakthrough in the movement toward getting away from diesel fuels and ultimately combustion-based engine technologies. So those are two things that we're doing. We're also looking at yard tractors. Those are the trucks, the small trucks that run around and move containers around a terminal. We're testing those with renewable natural gas and hydrogen fuel cell and batteries as well. And so these are all things that we're working on. We're working on a tugboat that will be a hybrid technology. And so it also will rely on batteries and ultimately toward a fuel cell. And so pretty interesting stuff that we're doing. As I said earlier, the technology, the state of science for these types of zero emission technologies is still early, it's nascent in its development. But we're pretty excited about being able to test some of the early uses for this equipment from anywhere around the world.
Great, thank you very much for that. We've had a question from our audience, Chris, which is with regards to an eco-tax. They're asking, will an eco-tax be put upon passengers and cargo in order to reduce emissions? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the idea of generating money and in order to pay for environmental programs is not new. We've thought a lot about it here, and the concern that we have is you have to strike a balance between, generating money and revenue from such a tax and having an adverse effect on the port and its operations and its ability to move, to move business in and out of the port. We are source of 1 in 9 jobs in the region here. Our cargo touches every congressional district in the United States. And so we have to be a little careful that we don't impose too much in the way of fees and taxes on operations of the port. But that being said, yes, the idea of using fees to help incentivize and also help to generate revenues is not something that we have ignored. And so it continues to be something we will think about here and talk about. We're going to have a rate or a fee associated with drayage operations here sometime next year. So that's already going to happen. And the question of whether it is expanded to include other things is still open.
Chris, I'm curious to know, with regards to green technology that other ports are utilizing, that you are keeping abreast of or have an eye on, that is really, truly innovative. Any thoughts from you with regards to green technology that other ports or terminals are utilizing that you see gaining more mainstream in the future?
Well, we try to stay on top of things pretty much here. So whatever people are trying are things that we're also trying to do here. Really impressed with how the ports in China have made the transition to alternative fuels and natural gas. They did it very quickly, and that was very impressive for all the different types of equipment that they use, and we communicate with them regularly. So that was quite impressive that they made that transition so quickly. And we're watching that very carefully and working closely with them to test some of the equipment. As I said, the renewable natural gas is the next step. They have not been using renewable natural gas in China as much, but the idea of operating natural gas equipment is something that we've been thinking about. There's also something called a rubber-tired gantry crane that is a big crane that is that straddles over rows of containers, and it is now being used in hybrid form, and we're seeing that catch on all over the world. Those are really good pieces of equipment. They are just run on a very small engine with a battery, not unlike passenger vehicles that are hybrids that have the small engine and the battery. And so we're really very interested in following those developments. We've tested, and some of them are being used at the Port of Los Angeles. And so that's pretty exciting as well. But the big thing is to see the expansion of the use of shore power. That's, as I said, something that we really began doing here 10, 15 years ago. And we're starting to see it take hold around the world. And that's pretty exciting because it really reduces emissions at birth. And we think it's a very important solution.
Appreciate that. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have now, but thank you both very much for your insights and your participation today. And for the viewers at home, all of this will be available on Smartports TV, so stay tuned.